somebody steals the ball. It's just like, come on, guys. You're professionals here. All right, it shows that we are alive. That's a good thing. I'm going to leave that be tonight then. All right, if you have your Bibles, turn them to 2 Chronicles. In the thought of, I have helped disciple a lot of people. I can't say it's a lot in comparison to Christ or Paul or anything like that, but I've gone through the process of trying to disciple people. I loved one of my jobs I had. My boss was coming to church, and he had recently gotten saved, and so my dad told me, you should really try to work with him when you're at work. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I talked to him about it, and he's like, well, how about we take the first hour you're here to go through over the Bible? I'm up for that. I don't care if you pay me or not. And at that point, I'll take the first hour of any job to go over the Bible with my boss, right? So for, I don't know, I worked there a year and a half. We spent, it wasn't always an hour, but we would spend going over the Bible and going through that, trying to ground it. That was exciting and the thing to be able to do and try to ground somebody that was a newborn Christian. And it's always good when you can go through like that and show someone. And I've taught teens, a lot of teens, unfortunately, that tried to disciple them and show them. And I must be really bad at it. I'm just telling you. Because I look at our church and the people I've tried to help, they're just not here. Some of them, it's not my fault. Okay, maybe all of them. But with what I mean by that is they moved or something like that, and ultimately it comes down to a choice on the part of an individual what they're going to do. Okay, you know the story of Jabu in Africa. If you're watching live, watch the last time I preached, which has been a while, and I talked about him then, and that you'll be caught up to speed. Where he made a choice, and that was a salvation choice. But something that we forget as Christians is every day we have to make a similar choice. Paul said, I die daily. It is a daily choice that Paul had to make to die to his flesh, to live unto Christ. He mentioned that the good that I would do, that I do I not. But that which I would not do, that do I. You try to do better. That's all. Anyway, it's a confusing thing where he wanted to do what was right, but Kevin's back there going like this with okay, zoom out. Distracting. But when you want to do he wanted to do what's right. This is the Apostle Paul. He wanted to do what's right. And I think every Christian, if you ask them whether they want to love the Lord and serve Him with all their heart, they'll tell you yes. But the problem is there's a disconnect. Because the good that they don't want to do, that which they don't want to do, that's what they're doing. I really don't want this. I am starting to go on a diet. I'm the heaviest I've ever been, or I was 3 days ago. 195, right? And 3 days ago I decided I was going to go on a diet to try to lose some weight. You say, hey, I don't need to lose weight. I agree with you. My knees don't, though. And my knees tell me that I need to lose something or it's not going to go well. So I'm like, let's lose it now before I have problems when I'm 50. So I need to do that. And so I'm trying to drop down. My goal is like 179. Let's go down to 180. 180 is a good round number. We're going to go 1 pound less. That way I can gain a pound and be good. My reverting back, that's my leeway. So I'm trying to lose just a little bit. And came over for visitation. I've been doing good. I've had hard-boiled eggs and yogurt for breakfast. It's bad for your cholesterol, by the way. I keep track of that, and it's like, my goodness gracious. But I'm not too worried about that. That aspect of it, I'll figure it out. But that's been good. That's like 200 and some calories, and I'm doing good with that. And then we go to lunch, and I had salad. For somebody who's used to going to Wendy's, salad is quite the drop, you know. but salad and with ham spread onto it. Not honey roast ham or anything like that. That would be defeating the purpose. But we got ham on there, and that for the protein aspect of it, and throw little celery sticks, and it just, oh my goodness gracious. Last night I walked into the church, and Mrs. Kohler had chili dogs for the kids. You know how strong I was on that? I had 3. I'm going to try and lose weight, right? This is going well. I resisted. I want to lose weight. I really do. My knees need me to. But those chili dogs, they are calling. And I think sometimes my resolve on dieting is the same resolve Christians have for following Christ. They really want to serve God. They have that goal in mind, and that's something they want. But when they get to the right here and now of chili dogs, or you fill in the blank of I want to still have my friends, or I want to not look odd, or I want, you fill in the blanks, and we get that temptation, and that 900 calories doesn't look so bad right about then. And it was closer to about 1,200. But that's neither here nor there on that to them at the point. I can sacrifice that. That's just one day. This morning, eggs and yogurt. This afternoon, I had a ham sandwich on 12-grain wheat bread, which was like 120 calories a piece, which is still ridiculous. I'm like, I'm trying to eat healthy here, and it's still bad for me. And then I went on a delivery, and you know what they had? Dollar Daffin's candy bars. 320 calories. I enjoyed every minute of it and felt guilty afterwards. I have a very high resolve to do this. Oh no. Some people that are keeping me honest may be in this room, and I'm like, oh, this might not be good. I shouldn't have admitted that one. But this is, it's a struggle. But it's a very real, and that might be humorous to you all. But it's a serious problem. And it comes down to a few things in our Christian walk. Newborn Christians go through this process, and let me take the newborn out of it. Christians go through this cycle where we get into our Bibles, when we grow and we like it and we're excited. Normally after a revival meeting or something like that, we get into our Bibles, we're really faithful on it, we're hitting it hard, and then a couple weeks go by and something happens, a family event or a television show or something happens where we're just like, oh, I gotta be there for that, and it just throws us, and it's just one day. For our teenagers and for our children in schools, it's going to be the start of school this year. I always dread it because you've got them away from a lot of those influences where they really don't communicate with their friends much because they don't have a ride to get to their friends. And so they're away from their friends, and they can really start focusing in their spare time in the summer on maybe reading their Bibles, but then school starts. That's why a lot of youth groups will have back-to-school revivals where they have a big service right before the schools trying to get them to commit to serving God right before they're going to be challenged. I was dealing with Zach Gramsci at camp on Tuesday night, the one night I was able to go down, and he was making a decision about sports. And he says, I'm going to put God before sports. And I was like, Bud, you and I know each other. We can be open here. I'm telling you, the first day that you make a decision and you word it like that, first time it comes, you're going to think, well, that doesn't say that. And so I said, Bud, for your sake, for keeping this decision that God's making, you need to be specific. What are you giving up? What are you going to do? And what is it going to cost you? And so his decision was, I am not going to miss church for football, even if it means I miss playing time. Right? First week back, talks to the coach. I need to miss Wednesday practices. That's under the lights day for Reynolds. Big deal. Coach says you can't miss Wednesdays. Zach, that's a decision. Decision time. What am I going to do? So he quits football. Listen, that decision is not specific. What happens on that day? I praise the Lord that it happened like the week after camp and not 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. The timing was good on that because Zach was able to make a decision from a position of strength where he didn't forget that decision. But there's many more that he's going to have to make. And Christians, this is just what it comes down to. When are we have a daily struggle with this? And Zach was coming from a place of strength, but how many Christians go to work in a place of weakness because we don't read our Bibles or don't pray? And so we end up in a place of weakness. I want to talk to you about someone who is the epitome of someone who came and followed an example, but the goal and the key to every Christian walk is found in his life. It's 2 Chronicles chapter 34. If you'll turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 34, I love the story of Joash. I love the story of Josiah. Josiah is my favorite king. If I were to term them, Joash to me would be church kids. And I say that simply because he literally grew up in church. But I would term Josiah as more your saved out of family that was a mess. And so I love that application on this because, I mean, it doesn't get more wicked than Josiah's dad and granddad, Manasseh and Ammon. It doesn't get much worse than those two. And it tells us in verse 1, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. Hey, we get to serve an 8-year-old. And he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and he walked in the ways of David his father, and declined neither to the right hand nor to the left. I want you to see, first of all, this is a pattern that Christians fall. In a Christian home, it's normally the dad. In a non-Christian home, normally it's whoever's discipling them, whether it be pastor. In adults, it's normally who's discipling them. But they start following after a person's example. He followed after the God of David, his father, right? David's not his father. David's been dead hundreds of years at this point. But David is the epitome. He's the apple of God's eye. If you want to follow and have a godly example, Josiah basically as an 8-year-old recognized, look, we're not heading the right direction. We need to change something. I'm going to follow the king that God actually blessed. And he wants to follow after that pattern. And so he starts after that. And that's all his goal is. Newborn Christian, I'm not saying that necessarily accepted Christ at this point, but this is the mindset, right, of a newborn Christian, where we're going to follow after the example of someone who is trying to teach us the right way. For Josiah, all he had was the written records of David and what David wrote. He would have had Psalms. He would have had the books of the Bible written up to this point for him to go back and to see what David did. He probably would have seen the pitfalls of David and tried to avoid those at all costs. He would have gone and tried, and for at least 8 years, Josiah is following after the example of David. That's a good thing. It keeps him from trouble, right? It keeps him and guides him. But it isn't enough. It isn't enough to just follow after that person. I discipled a young man named Lee. He accepted Christ. He was someone that my sister looked at me once and said, Daniel, I know you think he's your Timothy, but just realize if something happens to him, you can't throw in the towel. I was very close to Lee. I spent a lot of time with him, and Lee was good as long as I was around. And he was a responsible individual. His dad ended up going to jail, and so he ended up getting a job as a teenager to try to help his mom make ends meet because they still had kids at home. Very responsible young man. But I remember when he stopped, just abruptly stopped. It was after at one point he looked at me and said, Daniel, I'm not sure I'm saved. And I looked at him and I said, okay, Lee, let's talk about this. What does God say about salvation? We went through the plan of salvation again, and I went through it, and he said, and I said, have you done that? And he's like, yes, I did that, but why don't I feel like I'm saved? I said, Lee, what are you doing that you know is wrong? And we talked about it, and he gave me what he knew was wrong in his life. He was open with me about it. Not everybody is. And I talked to him and said, Lee, if you want God's hand on you to where you know for sure and you don't have this doubt, you're going to have to give God everything, right? This is something that you gave place on, and now Satan's got a stronghold. And you're going to have to find a way to get rid of it if you're going to grow. And for a little while he did okay. And then it was a couple months later he was gone because those things took over. Lee followed me. I made a determination after Lee that I'd never let somebody follow me again. It's not enough for them to follow me. And I don't know that, and what I mean by that, yes, they're going to start, but me is going to stop real quick. They're going to have to see beyond me, or it's not going to be enough. And had Josiah stayed at the following David example, what do you do when you run across a situation that David didn't run across? What's he going to do then? Or what if he disagrees how David did it? If David's your example, you know he's fallible, he made mistakes. Then eventually you will fall. It's not enough to follow a person. We can't just follow pastor. Although we should follow pastor. He's the God-given leader of this church. But if you're just serving God for pastor, then you're going to fall and you're going to fail. Because he's not going to be with you all the time. Nor should he be with you all the time. Sometimes we get so bent out of shape because we think pastor should be spending more time with us. Not realizing in a church there's a lot more people than us. And if you divvied up 1 hour each day, it wouldn't even begin to do all of the church people. And he wouldn't get any rest that way. And if we want to follow God, it's got to be following more than just pastor. I remember someone saying that we were at a dinner table with them and saying that the missionary said, I hope you realize what you have in your pastor. Oh, we'll never forget. And Dad had personally led both of them to the Lord. We'll never forget what God has done in our lives through pastor. And less than a year later, they're out of church. I'll never forget that statement followed by that reaction. So many different times when people have seen fit to follow a man, and it's not enough. It's not enough because eventually you'll disagree with them. And then what are you going to do? If you're following a man, you're going to be in trouble. For in the 8th year of his reign, okay, he's 8 years when he begins to reign. How old is he now? 16. I'm not even a mathematician and I got that one. Look at this. While he was yet young, he began to seek after the God of David, his father. Okay, a little progression here. He's seeing a little past David. He's saying David followed God. I'll follow David as he follows his God. We've got a little bit more of a progression here, right? And in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places and the groves and the carved images and the molten images. What's he realized? Okay, David did these things because he's following God. I need to see what this God says. Right? Now, he doesn't have the book of the law yet. It's yet to be found in the temple. But he knows a few things. These groves that we have are not serving that God. They got to go. And so as a 16-year-old, he said, okay, if I want to serve God, serve the God of David, I'm going to have to get some things cleaned up in my life. And so they start getting rid of things, which is good. Awesome. I love it when I see this. Got a phone call from a parent once concerned. Why are my kids throwing away their DVDs that they bought? Well, Pastor had a message and he talked about this, and they were getting rid of some things. Things probably because of that. I said, I don't know for sure, but you can ask them, and that's probably what they'll tell you. because there's probably something in there that they think is something that they wouldn't want Christ to see. And so that was satisfactory. But you get some crazy response from parents when you get people like there. I remember my cousin coming home from camp once, determined that she had surrendered, that she was not going to wear slacks anymore, because that was something God laid on her heart. And parents, that's ridiculous. You're going to wear them anyway. Woe be it to parents, godly parents supposedly, who would hinder a decision that their child has made. I don't want to be that parent before God, ever. I know of many other examples of that. I'm not going to go into them. Someone was called to preach each once. I'll talk about this one. Called to preach once, and the pastor looked at them and said, "You'll get over it." I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the person that is the wet blanket on a decision. Sometimes it might seem silly. Brother Rogers talked once about the girl who made the decision that she was going to stop reading fiction books. And she wasn't reading Harry Potter or anything like that. She was reading... Yeah, it was not things that you would typically think was necessarily evil. But that was taking place in her life where God ought to be. And she was focused more on reading that than she was on her Bible reading. Realizing the contradiction, she wanted to give it up. If you want to grow into Christian life, you have to make sure there's nothing between you and God. And that's the next step. You've got to see beyond the person who's discipling you, and you have to be able to clean up some things. Realize, look, if I want God to work in my life, I got to prepare the field. I got to get on blessing ground. If we want God to work in our church, we've got to make sure we're on blessing ground. We've got to make sure. We're going to have revival here just a couple weeks, actually. If you want revival to happen at Grace Baptist, we have to make sure that there is nothing between us and God. That we have a close walk with Him. So that when He preaches, we'll be able to say, okay, God, there's nothing between my God and my Savior. So we're going to make a decision for Christ, and we can move forward from Him instead of just trying to get back to zero, square one. What I love, other people started following Josiah. You see, when you start taking these steps, other people start following you. And they break down the altars of Balaam in his presence and the images that were on high above them. He cut them down in the groves and the carved images and the molten images. He brake in pieces, made dust of them, and strode it upon the graves of them that had sacrificed to them. And he burnt the bones of the priests upon the altars and cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. He was effective, man. He was not taking any prisoners. He was like, this is dead. And if you're going to make a decision and stand for Christ, you're going to have to determine that the things that you have made a decision on are dead. I often would take the teens that come back from camp when I give them their decision cards back. I'd often give them to them at the cemetery. I'd take them for a walk. We'd go through all these stones, these old stones, and see them, which are kind of cool. And we'd go and I'd hand them back, and we'd all talk as a group about some of the decisions. I wouldn't obviously make some of them public because some are more private than others, and some of them I may talk to them about it before, and can I mention this to the group? But we would talk about them. Why? This decision is dead. We're never going to make this decision again because we're going to make sure it never comes out again. It stays here. It stays buried. And Josiah was trying to make sure there's no way anybody ever uses this thing again. He kills the priests. You're not going to be here anymore. For us, that would be like if you're addicted to video games, taking a baseball bat to your Xbox or PlayStation or whatever your game system would be. For someone with problems with the computer, it would be, well, the same with the computer modem. For somebody that's likes reading, for the person reading, the girl reading those books, it would be, well, probably hacking up her library card. You got to find a way to make it to where you're not going to want to go back. He burns the bones on the altar to where those are desecrated, where if you're going to do something there, you're going to have to build another altar. because you're going to recognize this is never being used again. You're going out of your way to make it inconvenient for you to trod that path again. And if you're going to make a decision, you need to make it inconvenient for you to go back. I want to protect my eyes from the computer. I have a program called K9 on my computer to filter anything, and it does a really good job. I can't even go to gun sites. It's really annoying on some of this because you want to do research on something and it's like barks at you, and it's like, I know. But you know who has the password to my K9 account? Because if I have my password, what's the point? You know who has my password? Chris and Elizabeth. They're over in the Philippines. Not only do I have to wait until they're awake to get it, I really have to need it if I'm going to get that password. They have to wait until they're awake, but they can change it at any time. They can go in into my account and see anything that has made that dog bark on my thing. There's no hiding it. I have no way of doing something on that computer without them being able to directly see it. You know what that is? No way I'm going down there. There's bones burned on altar. There is no way I am going down that path with the computer. There's many other ways to sin. I'm not saying I'm perfect on those things. But you want to make it and keep a decision? Make it to where it's inconvenient to go back, where you are definitely saying no to God. You are reprobate in order to go back on that decision. But with him, they break it down. Right? They. It's plural. People will follow. You say you're worried about your friends. The ones that are truly your friends will be along with you. The ones that care about you will make themselves known, and they're going to help you tear it down. I've never told someone no when they've asked me, can you come over? I need to deal with this. Never said no to someone who dealt with it like that. I'll always make a way to get over there. Sometimes it's later than what they were thinking. But I'll always make it over to deal with someone when they're struggling with an issue. I remember a pastor who was trying to help an addict get over. He went to his church to get over drugs, and he called him after work one day and said, not the pastor, but the addict called him and said to the pastor, "I'm weak today, and I know it." And so that pastor brought a sleeping bag over, parked on the couch, and stayed there until all his withdrawals were gone at that time. And your friends that really love you and want you to serve the Lord are going to be willing to make sacrifices like that to help you keep on that path. Keep accountable and help you tear down those altars. And also it'll help them grow in the Lord. Moving down because I'm running out of time. Now in the 18th year of his reign, how old is he now? He's about 26. All right? He's about 26 years old. He's my age. Now this is a little old, I would say, for somebody. I would hope it doesn't take 18 years. But the reality of the situation is I see way too many Christians that it takes forever for them to grow up. It's frustrating. You see these 50, 60, 70-year-old people that are making childish spiritual decisions. Now in the 18th year of his reign, when he had purged the land, cleansed the land, he's cleaned it, and the house, he sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah and Messiah, the governor of the city, and Joah, the son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the house of the Lord, his God. A little bit of a difference in wording there. You might not it seem like a big deal, but it's not the God of David, his father. It's not following David. It's the Lord, his God. It's his God's house. There's a difference there. He's grown up. It's his relationship with God on the line now. He's not following David anymore, although he might consult it to find out what David did in the history and the word that is. Incidentally, God gives him the word of God after this to show him how far they've come, and he realizes how much farther they've got to go. But it's the Lord, his God. And if a Christian is ever going to stand, they're going to have to come to the point where they're not following a person, but they're following God. My boss, I worked with him for a year and a half, and we did discipleship, and he grew. And I left, tore my rotator cuff the first time, and I had to leave that job because I couldn't do that job until I had it repaired, and then I wouldn't be able to do it for a year after that. So I had to leave that job, and I still wish I had devotions in the morning with my boss. You know, wouldn't that be awesome to start your day that way? But one warning sign for me on that one was he didn't keep following God on his own. He sought out someone else to teach him, which is okay. I mean, I encourage multiple people to teach people. But at some point, you got to have that walk on your own. You shouldn't have to come to a Bible study to get your walk with God. Although, make it to Bible study if you can. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's not your walk with God. If that's what you're counting on for your sustenance, you don't have the walk with God that you need to have. You can get blessings there. You can get major blessings from a Bible study. It'll grow you and encourage you that other people are serving the Lord and following the Bible. But that's not where you get your meat to grow through the week. All right? I have to make sure I'm getting protein. I felt so bad. One day, I felt so bad one morning. I didn't eat my eggs and my yogurt. I ate instead a healthy cereal. It's only 200, with milk it was like 375 calories, right? Something like that. That's not that bad. I had it, but there's no protein in cereal. Did you know that? There's very little in the milk. Well, anyway, I was not feeling good. I was so weak. By the time lunchtime came, I was like feeling feeble. It's okay to have some of that stuff every now and then, right? But you need to have that protein as your staple so that then you can enjoy that other stuff, or it's not going to work, right? You get this stuff out of order. If I had that for a snack or for dinner or something, it would not have been as bad because I'd already had my protein that gets me through the day at the beginning of the day. If you're going to live a Christian walk, you have to have that protein. You have to have that daily walk with God where you get something from it on your life, or you're not going to be able to grow. Oh, and then this can be your cereal or your added blessing after a day where you've already gotten everything that you need to get through the day. The house of the Lord, his God. God gives him the word of God after this to continue to grow him. Something that is also a pattern, and Josiah found this out, and Joash found this out. You get and you grow, and then you grow, and then you grow, and you think you're doing pretty good. And when I see a Christian like that, I get very nervous anymore. You just tell. They're doing well. God, I'm doing what, they have that walk with God, they're helping somebody. Just something about them. You always see it. I've seen it in, every single person I've ever tried to disciple and in my own life, where you feel like you're doing pretty good. God's blessing, nothing seems to be going incredibly wrong, and then something hits you, and you realize you weren't ready for it. And you wished you had been as studious then as you were. You wished you had been as studious then as you were weeks, months before when you were getting to that point with that walk. Listen, you can never in a relationship take a step back and expect it to grow. You can never stay solid and expect it to grow. You must push on. You must get closer. You must find out more. You must do more things together if you want it to be able to continue to grow. Our relationship with God is never done. God gives him his word. After he gets that walk with God and where God's going to be in his life settled, God gives him his word to continue to grow him and realize, hey, you just started. We got more to do. Every day, we should be rediscovering this word and realize we've got more to do. Pray for the teenagers. Pray for our young Christians. Pray for each other. This is not something we're ever immune to. I'm tired of seeing Christians think they've got it and understand it and think because they have grown, they on this issue know more. On this one issue, it's not everything. They would never tell you they know more than pastor. But on this one issue, he's wrong, and I know better. And when they get that attitude, that's when they're at the place where they're doing pretty good as a Christian. They get that attitude, and then they start to worm away. And unless God gives them a humbleness of heart, not that necessarily the pastor's always right, but where they're willing to submit. It can be something as easy as tithing or missions giving that gets them just a little disjointed. For the people that Dad led to the Lord and said that they'd never forget, it was the issue of modesty. Pastor spent literally 5 minutes of a message talking about modesty, and it was a question brought up by someone else during a Sunday school lesson. And that offended them. 5 minutes. That's all it took to offend them. And a month later, they're out of church. For others, it's been tithing. For others, it's giving up something they don't really want to give. It's amazing to me how little it takes to be offended. And when you're really right with God, you'd be ashamed that it ever be there. But our pride keeps us from going back. Don't let it be there. Don't let that pride be there. Always be willing to humble yourself. My response to people when they have that attitude is normally, you need to read Philippians 2 about every day. And I won't explain why, but you need to read Philippians 2 about every day. Why? Because if you can get in your mind that Christ humbled himself to die for us, you really should have no problem humbling yourself when we're talking about the Bible. All right? Anyway. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and in due time he will lift thee up. I may have misquoted that, but that's the idea. God wants to bless you. He wants to bless all of us. He wants to bless this church, but in order for us to get the blessing, we have to be in a place where he can bless us. We have to have that right relationship with him. We have to be able to realize where he is in our life so we can push forward. Don't let anything get in the way between you and God. Let's keep moving forward as a church and a family of God for him. And I look forward to seeing what God's going to do. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about what God can do with this church right now. It seems like just about everybody pulling in the direction of let's serve God. And I like that. Everybody's serving in some ministry. Now we just got to pull and keep pulling. Forget about a lot of other things, there's qualms or anything like that. Let's just serve God. You get that as your priority, we're going to do all right. But we got to lay aside some weights to make sure we keep that focus, because we like picking them up. All right, let's pray. Actually, let's break up into our prayer groups.